Hello, and welcome back to Creepy Chronicles. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy Creepy Chronicles filled with spine-chilling horror, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. It happened during a hot summer night in Massachusetts. The kind of night that makes the air feel heavy even after midnight. I was a police officer then, working the night shift in a small town that most people drove through without noticing. It was the kind of place where nothing much happened after sunset. A few drunk drivers on weekends, a few teenagers breaking into empty buildings for fun, a few noise complaints from neighbors who hated each other. Most nights were slow enough that I could hear the ticking of the dashboard clock in my cruiser. That night felt longer than usual. I had been assigned to a patrol session that seemed to stretch on forever. The roads were empty, the houses were dark, and the radio stayed quiet for so long that I started talking to myself just to stay awake. I drove past gas stations, closed diners, old farmhouses, and dark stretches of trees that leaned over the road like they were trying to hide it from the sky. I remember thinking how strange summer nights could be in that part of Massachusetts. During the day, everything looked normal. Green fields, old brick buildings, small churches, quiet houses with flags on the porch, but at night, the same town became something else. The trees looked too close. The old warehouses looked like dead animals. The narrow roads felt like they were leading somewhere they should not. I had been on duty for hours when dispatch finally called my unit. The dispatcher gave me an address on the edge of town. He said there had been a call from someone nearby. The caller had reported strange activity around an abandoned warehouse. Possible trespassing, possible vandalism, maybe someone breaking in. At first, I was skeptical. I always seemed to get the most boring assignments. If there was a report of a suspicious noise, I got sent. If someone saw a shadow near a barn, I got sent. If teenagers were smoking behind a closed store, I got sent. I had spent half my career walking through empty buildings and finding nothing but raccoons, broken bottles, and kids who thought they were smarter than they were. Still, it was my job. I confirmed the address and turned the cruiser toward the old industrial road. The warehouse was not far from town, but it sat in a forgotten area where the pavement cracked, the streetlights were far apart, and weeds grew through everything. As I drove, I heard dispatch come over the radio again, but this time the voice was different. It was sharper, almost panicked. I caught only part of it at first because of static. Do not go there. I frowned and reached for the radio. Dispatch, repeat that? There was a burst of static. Then I heard my dispatcher again, but he sounded farther away now, like he had turned from the microphone. Don't go there. Don't send him there. For a second, my foot eased off the gas. I looked down at the radio. Dispatch, are you talking to me? No answer. The radio hissed quietly. I waited a few seconds, then shook my head. I told myself he was probably talking to someone else in the room. Dispatch could get chaotic, especially if more than one call came in. Maybe another officer had been sent somewhere dangerous. Maybe I had misunderstood. That is what I told myself. I kept driving. The warehouse appeared at the end of the road like a dark shape crouching under the sky. It was an old building, long abandoned, with broken windows and rusted metal doors. Half the sign above the entrance had fallen off years ago. The rest of it hung crooked, too faded to read. The parking lot was cracked and empty, except for weeds pushing up through the asphalt. I pulled in slowly and parked near the front. The moment I stepped out of the car, the air changed. I do not mean the temperature dropped, though it felt colder. I mean, the whole atmosphere shifted. The summer heat was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something sharp, something old. The air felt wrong, like I had stepped into a place where I was not supposed to breathe. The night insects had been loud when I arrived. Crickets, cicadas, the usual summer noise. But when my boots touched the pavement, everything went silent. I stood beside my cruiser and listened. Nothing. No wind. No animals. No movement from inside the warehouse. I turned on my flashlight and walked toward the entrance. The front door was partly open. It hung loose on one hinge, and when I pushed it, it groaned so loudly that the sound seemed to roll through the whole building. Dust drifted down from somewhere above me. I raised my flashlight and stepped inside. The warehouse was large and almost completely empty. Old wooden crates sat along one wall. Rusted pipes ran across the ceiling. Cracks split the concrete floor in every direction. The air smelled like dust, mold, and old water. My flashlight beam moved slowly over broken glass, peeling paint, and walls stained by years of damp weather. "Police," I called. "If anyone is inside, make yourself known." My voice echoed and came back to me smaller. No answer. I moved deeper inside. Every step made little pieces of debris crunch under my boots. I kept one hand near my holster and the other around my flashlight. The building was so quiet that I could hear my own breathing. Somewhere above me, metal creaked as the old roof settled. I swept the light across the floor. Then something fell. A vase dropped from a shelf near the far wall and shattered on the ground. I jumped, my hand going straight to my gun. The sound was too loud in the silence. Pieces of ceramic scattered across the concrete, sliding into the dark. For a few seconds, I stood completely still, waiting for someone to run, laugh, or curse. Nothing happened. I moved toward the broken vase slowly. It was strange to see something like that in a warehouse. It was not industrial equipment. It was not trash left by teenagers. It was an old vase, white with faded blue patterns, the kind of thing someone's grandmother might keep on a dining room table. I crouched beside the pieces and shone my light over them. At first, I thought maybe someone had knocked it over and run, but there were no footprints in the dust near the shelf. No fresh marks, no sign that anyone had stood there. I picked up one of the larger pieces with my gloved hand. There was something dark on the inside. For a second, I thought it was old dirt or dried paint. Then I brought the flashlight closer and saw that it looked too thick, too reddish-brown. My stomach tightened. I put it down. I started looking around more carefully. Maybe there had been criminals here. Maybe someone had left evidence behind. Maybe the call was not as boring as I first thought. I checked the corners, the old crates, the side rooms. I found nothing. No people. No fresh blood. No tools. No drugs. No signs of a camp. Only dust, cracks, and that broken vase. After about 20 minutes, I decided there was nothing more I could do alone. I would report the broken item, mention the strange stain, and request that someone come back in daylight. I left the warehouse and stepped into the night. The air outside felt even heavier than before. I was halfway back to my cruiser when I saw her. An old woman stood near the edge of the parking lot. I stopped. She had not been there when I arrived. I was sure of that. The lot had been empty. The road had been empty. There were no houses close enough for an old woman to walk from without me seeing her approach. She was dressed in a long, elegant dress that looked old-fashioned. It reminded me of the clothes I had seen older farm women wear when I was a child. The dress was pale, maybe cream or gray, though it was hard to tell in the dark. It moved slightly around her ankles, even though there was no wind. Her hair was white and tied back neatly. Her posture was straight. too straight for someone her age. She did not look lost. She did not look afraid. She looked like she had been waiting for me. I raised my flashlight. "Ma'am?" I called. "Are you okay?" She did not answer right away. Her face was calm, but her eyes were fixed on the warehouse behind me. I walked toward her slowly. "Ma'am, this area isn't safe. Did you call about someone being here?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes were pale and wet, but not blind. They seemed too aware, like they were seeing more than they should. "No," she said softly. "I did not call." Her voice was thin but clear. "Do you live nearby?" I asked. She smiled a little. "I used to." That answer did not make me feel better. I glanced around the empty lot. "How did you get here?" "The same way everyone gets here," she said, "by following what calls to them." I stared at her for a second, waiting for her to laugh or explain. She did not. "Ma'am," I said carefully, "it's late. Do you have someone I can call? A family member?" She looked at me like I had asked something childish. "My family is gone. I'm sorry to hear that. They have been gone for a long time." Her gaze moved back to the warehouse. I followed her eyes. The building looked darker now. I do not know how that was possible, but it did. The broken windows seemed like empty eye sockets. "Do you know anything about this place?" I asked. The old woman's expression changed. Her mouth tightened, and for the first time, she looked afraid. "You should not have gone inside." I felt my throat go dry. "Why not?" She took one slow step closer. "Because it noticed you." Those words made the back of my neck prickle. "What noticed me?" She did not answer. Instead, she lifted one thin hand and pointed at the warehouse. "The dead do not rest in there," she said. "They rot. They stink. They wait." My grip tightened around my flashlight. "What dead?" "The bodies," she said, as if it was obvious. "The bodies hidden inside the walls." My blood went cold. I had not told her I had gone inside. I had not told her what I saw. I had not told her about the broken vase or the dark stain. Yet she spoke about the warehouse like she knew every inch of it. "Ma'am," I said, my voice lower now, "how do you know there are bodies in there?" She turned her pale eyes back to me. "Because I smelled them before I died." I did not speak. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, I asked, "What did you say?" She smiled sadly. "You heard me. I should have stepped back. I should have called dispatch right then. I should have gone to my cruiser, locked the doors, and waited for backup." But something in her voice held me there. "When I was young," she said, "that warehouse was not abandoned. Men worked there. Men laughed there. Men drank there. Men brought women there when no one was watching." Her eyes drifted to the broken windows. "One night I followed my husband. I thought he had another woman. I was angry. Foolish. I thought the worst thing I would find was betrayal." She paused. "What did you find?" I asked, though I did not want to know. She looked at me. "I found the thing wearing him. A cold pulse moved through my body." "The thing?" I whispered. She nodded. "It looked like him from far away. It walked like him. It spoke with his voice. But when it turned toward me, I saw that his face was not sitting right, like a mask pulled over the wrong bones." My hand moved to my radio. The old woman noticed and shook her head. "That will not help you." I ignored her and pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I need a second unit at my location." Static answered. I tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy?" More static. Then, very faintly, I heard breathing. Not from the old woman, from the radio. Slow, wet breathing. I released the button. The old woman looked past me. Her face went still. "Do not look too long," she whispered. Every muscle in my body tightened. "What?" Do not let it know you can see it. I wanted to turn around, but my body refused. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Near the warehouse entrance, something stood in the dark. At first, I thought it was a man. Then, I saw that he was naked. His skin was pale under the weak moonlight, except where it was covered in dark red stains. Blood streaked his chest, arms, legs, and face. His head leaned slightly to one side. His mouth was stretched into a wide, evil grin. His eyes had rolled upward so far that I could only see the whites. He was completely still. I felt fear lock around my lungs. I forced my gaze back to the old woman because looking at him directly felt like stepping toward an open grave. "Do you see him?" I whispered. "Yes," she said. "What is he?" Her mouth trembled. "Not a man." The naked figure did not move, but I could feel him watching me. Even with his eyes rolled up, I felt it. His grin seemed to grow wider in the corner of my vision. "What does it want?" I asked. The old woman's face folded with grief. "It wants to be invited." "Invited where?" "Into your life," she said. "Into your house, into your name, into the empty places you carry." I did not understand, and maybe she saw that. "It waits in places where terrible things happen," she continued. "It wears what it finds. Bodies, voices, faces, memories. Sometimes it wears the dead. Sometimes it wears the living before they are dead." I thought of the dispatcher screaming not to go there. My stomach dropped. "Was the call real?" I asked. The old woman looked at me with pity. "There was a call," she said, "but not from someone living." The radio on my shoulder crackled. My dispatcher's voice came through, distorted and far away. "Unit 7, he said. "Do not enter the warehouse. Repeat, do not enter. We have no call from that address. Leave immediately." I stared at the radio. The old woman closed her eyes. "Too late," she whispered. Behind me, something made a soft clicking sound. I looked before I could stop myself. The naked man had moved closer. He now stood at the edge of the parking lot, maybe 20 feet away. I had not heard him walk. His grin was still there. His eyes were still rolled upward. Blood dripped slowly from his fingers onto the cracked pavement. I drew my gun. "Stay where you are," I shouted. He did not react. The old woman spoke behind me. "Bullets will only make it curious." I kept my gun aimed at him. "Get on the ground." The naked man's mouth opened. At first, no sound came out. Then he began to laugh. It was not loud, it was not natural. It sounded muffled, like someone laughing through a mouth full of wet cloth. His shoulders did not move, his chest did not rise, only the sound came out of him. Then he spoke. But it was not one voice. It was many. Some were men, some were women, some were children. Some sounded old, some sounded like they were drowning. "Officer," it said. My heart hammered against my ribs. The old woman stepped back. "Do not answer," she whispered. The thing tilted its head. "Officer," it said again, "you came when we called." I took a step backward. The thing took a step forward. My finger tightened on the trigger. "Stop." It stopped. For a moment we stared at each other across the cracked parking lot. I could hear my own breathing, fast and uneven. Sweat ran down the back of my neck despite the cold that had settled in the air. Then the old woman touched my arm. Her hand was freezing. "Go to your car," she said. "Do not run. Do not look back after you enter. Call for help, but do not say its name. Names are doors." "What name?" I whispered. She looked at the naked man. "The one it will give you." The thing smiled wider. My radio crackled again. This time, the voice coming through sounded like my own. "Unit 7 requesting entry," it said. "Unit 7 opening the door." I stared at the radio in horror. The naked man's lips did not move, but the voice continued. Unit 7 sees the bodies. Unit 7 wants to know more. I shook my head. No, the old woman's grip tightened. Go, I backed away, keeping my gun aimed at the thing. One step, then another. The cruiser was behind me, but it suddenly felt miles away. The thing did not move, but the grin never left its face. When I reached the driver's door, I opened it with one hand and slid inside. The old woman was still standing in the lot. For 1 second, she looked at me with something like sadness. Then she turned toward the naked man. I shut the door. I locked it. I started the engine with shaking hands. The headlights flashed across the parking lot. The old woman was gone. So was the naked man. I let out a breath that almost turned into a sob. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I need backup now. I need backup at the old warehouse on Harlow Road. Possible suspect on scene. I repeat, I need backup now. This time, dispatch answered immediately. Unit 7, leave the area. What? Leave the area now. I have a suspect. I saw someone. Leave the area now. His voice cracked with panic. I put the car in reverse. That was when I glanced at the rearview mirror. The naked man was standing behind my car. He was so close that I could see the wet shine of blood on his chest. He stood directly in the path of my reverse lights, completely unmoving. His head was tilted down now, but his eyes were still rolled upward. His grin looked impossible, stretched too wide for a human face. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. He raised one hand slowly and placed it against the trunk of my cruiser. The car sank slightly under the pressure. I ducked down in the seat before I even knew I was moving. My gun was in my hand, but I could not lift it. I could not breathe properly. I pressed myself low, like a child hiding under blankets, and kept whispering into the radio. Backup, please, send backup. The dispatcher said something, but I could not understand it. The radio was full of static and that wet breathing again. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. I kept waiting for a hand to come through the back window. I kept waiting for the roof to peel open. I kept waiting to hear that muffled laugh beside my ear. Nothing happened. The cruiser stayed still. I finally heard sirens in the distance. Blue and red lights washed across the inside of my car. Doors slammed. Voices shouted my name. Someone pulled open the driver's door, and I nearly fired my gun out of fear. It was another officer. He grabbed my shoulder and told me I was safe. But when I looked past him, the parking lot was empty. No old woman, no naked man, no blood behind my car, no footprints. Nothing. They searched the warehouse again, this time with a full team. They found no bodies in the walls, no evidence of a crime, no broken vase, even though I knew I had seen it shatter. No dark stain, no sign that anyone had been there. Dispatch later swore there had been no original call from that address. The first record they had was me saying I was on my way there. My dispatcher also denied, screaming at me not to go, at least at first. Later, when we were alone, he admitted he had heard something strange over the line that night. He said he heard my voice. He said my voice told him I was already inside. I left the force not long after. People said I had been under stress. They said I saw a homeless man, got scared, and let my imagination fill in the rest. They said the old woman was probably a confused local. They said summer heat and lack of sleep can do strange things to a person. Maybe they are right. But I know what I saw. I know the way the air changed when I stepped out of my car. I know the sound of that vase breaking. I know the old woman's cold hand on my arm. I know the grin on the naked man's face. I know how his voice came through the radio, sounding like mine. And I know one more thing. Every year, on the same summer night, at exactly midnight, My phone rings from a blocked number. I never answer. But last year, it went to voicemail. There was no message at first, just static, then wet breathing, then my own voice whispering from somewhere far away. Officer, you came when we called. I deleted the voicemail, but sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the air turns cold, I hear that same muffled laugh outside my window, and I know the thing from the warehouse is still waiting. I will never forget it. Story 2. My mother gave me the list when I turned 12. In most homes, turning 12 might have meant a quiet talk about growing up, changing bodies, and the strange, embarrassing things that come with becoming a teenager. Maybe a mother would sit her daughter down with a gentle voice and explain what was happening. Maybe there would be soft advice, a few warnings, and an awkward smile. But in our community, it was different. For us, it was not a normal mother-daughter talk. It was more like a survival briefing. Every girl received the rules at the same age. Every mother passed them down with the same serious face, the same tight mouth, and the same fear hiding behind her eyes. No one treated the rules like advice. They were not suggestions. They were not traditions meant to make elders feel respected. They were the only reason, we were told, that we were still alive. We lived on the outskirts of Delhi, in a neighborhood where the streets were narrow, the walls were stained by dust and rain, and the evenings always seemed to come too quickly. During the day, the place looked ordinary. Children ran between houses. Vendors pushed carts down the road. Women leaned over balconies to talk. Men sat outside tea stalls reading newspapers and arguing about politics. But after sunset, the whole neighborhood changed. The laughter disappeared first. Then, the shop shutters came down. The alleys became long, dark mouths. Every shadow looked deeper than it should. Every stray dog's bark sounded like a warning. People hurried indoors, and every mother's voice sharpened when she called for her daughter. We girls grew up under a shadow. The adults said that shadow was necessary. They said fear was what kept us careful. Care was what kept us safe. And safety in our neighborhood meant being spared by the entity. It had no real name. People only called it the entity, as if naming it properly would invite it closer. Nobody could describe its face because, according to the elders, nobody who saw it clearly ever came back to describe anything. It was not a ghost, exactly. It was not a demon in the temple story way, either. It was something worse, because it lived close to us. It belonged to our streets. It knew the alleys, the half-built lots, the empty stairwells, the broken streetlights, and the places where girls walked alone. The entity took girls. That was the truth everyone agreed on. It snatched them from allies. It dragged them out of the dark. It left their bodies in ditches, behind walls, near drains, or in empty plots where weeds grew high. Sometimes the girls returned alive, but broken in ways no one wanted to discuss. Sometimes they did not return at all. The elders spoke of those cases in low voices, always blaming darkness, carelessness, bad timing, or disobedience. My mother sat me down in our bedroom on my 12th birthday. The fan moved slowly above us, pushing hot air around the room. She held the folded paper in her lap for a long time before giving it to me. When she finally placed it in my hands, she gripped my shoulders so hard that her fingers left bruises. It feeds on vulnerability, she told me. Her face was pale, but her voice was firm. She spoke like she was giving me medicine that tasted terrible, but would save my life. If you follow the rules perfectly, you create a ward around yourself, a shield. Good, obedient girls are spiritually protected. The ones it takes, she swallowed. They forgot a rule, they broke the ward. They left a gap, and the entity entered through it. Her eyes were wide and wet with fear. I believed her. I had to. Believing her was easier than believing the world hated us for no reason. Believing in rules meant there was order. It meant there was a way to survive. If I was careful enough, quiet enough, covered enough, respectful enough, then I would be safe. That thought helped push the heavy fear away. It gave my terror a shape I could control. So I lived by the rules. The first rule was the ward of silence. On the street, I was never supposed to look straight ahead for too long. My eyes had to stay low, fixed on the ground, on my own feet, on the cracked pavement and puddles. If I heard whispers in the dark, if someone called my name, if a voice asked where I was going, I had to become a shadow. I was not allowed to flinch. I was not allowed to speed up. I was never, ever allowed to reply. No reaction meant safety. A girl who answered gave the entity a thread to pull. The second rule was the cloak. My clothes had to hide me. They had to be too loose, too plain, too big. My shape was not supposed to show. No loud colors, no bright fabric that might catch attention. My scarf had to be pinned securely across both shoulders, double layered, hiding my collarbones. Arms covered, legs covered, nothing exposed. We were told the entity was drawn to skin, to movement, to anything that made a girl look alive. The third rule was curfew. I had to be indoors before the streetlights flickered on. Once the lights began to buzz and blink against the evening sky, the day was over. If I was still outside after that, then I was in the entity's hour. The dark belonged to it. The roads belonged to it. Any girl outside then was walking through its domain. The fourth rule was the domestic shield. Home was safer, but not completely safe. When male guests came over, or when my father's friends visited, I had to practice invisibility. I had to serve chai perfectly, keep my head lowered, smile politely if spoken to, and disappear into the kitchen as soon as I could. We never knew who the entity had latched onto. It could ride inside a weak man. It could use him as a door. The fifth rule was the locked door. I was never to be alone in a room with a man, even if he shared my blood. The entity could possess the weak will to reach a girl. Blood did not always protect you. Walls did not always protect you. Doors had to stay open. Distance had to be kept. The sixth rule was ultimate compliance. If the force ever cornered me, I was not supposed to scream or fight. High sounds and aggression, my mother said, fed its malice. I had to be soft. I had to beg gently. I had to appeal to order, family, religion, and shame. I had to call the attacker Baya, or uncle. I had to remind him of God. I had to remind him I was someone's daughter. I had to make myself small enough that the entity might lose interest. I memorized every word. When the girl 3 houses down disappeared on her way back from college, the whole neighborhood whispered for weeks. Her name was Gita. She had been my friend once. She was loud, funny, and fearless in a way that made adults nervous. She wore jeans sometimes. She listened to music too loudly. She laughed with her head thrown back. She talked to boys from her class without looking at the ground. The auntie said she had been careless. She wore Western clothes. One of them whispered outside the temple. She stayed out too late, another said. She thought she was modern, someone added, shaking her head like Gita's disappearance was not a tragedy, but the end of a lesson. I remember hearing them and feeling something cold settle inside me. She broke the second rule, I told myself. Maybe the third, too. She broke the ward and let the evil in. It was cruel. I know that now. She had been my friend, and in my fear, I turned her into a warning. I did not mourn her properly. None of us did. We made her disappearance make sense by blaming her. It was the only way we could go on believing that safety was possible. I felt safe because I was obedient. I wore thick, suffocating layers of fabric even in 40-degree heat. I kept my eyes glued to the asphalt. I pinned my scarf so tightly that the fabric scratched my neck. I made perfect chai for guests. I smiled at uncles who looked at me too long. I learned to move through rooms without making sound. I treated every man with deep, trembling respect, because respect was supposed to keep the monster away. I was invisible, and because I was invisible, I believed I was safe. Then came the monsoon during my final year of college. The rain that day did not fall. It attacked. It came down in a deafening gray sheet, so thick that the road seemed to vanish a few feet ahead. Within minutes, the streets flooded. Buses stopped moving. Rickshaws stalled. Motorbikes sputtered and died in brown water. People stood trapped under shop awnings, holding bags over their heads while drains overflowed around their ankles. I panicked. It was 5:30 in the evening. The sky had already turned a bruised, violent purple. The storm made it darker than it should have been, and the streetlights were flickering weakly against the rain. Curfew, the entity's hour, was coming. I stepped into the flooded road because waiting felt worse than moving. The water rose to my knees in some places. My heavy shirt was soaked and clinging to my body. My scarf, which was supposed to shield me, stuck to my chest like a second skin. I felt exposed, naked. I had broken the second rule without meaning to. My clothes were still loose, but the rain had betrayed me. I could feel eyes on me. That is what I believed at first. The old fear came back so strongly that I could almost hear my mother's voice. Do not react. Do not look up. Walk. Be a shadow. But the rain made it impossible to disappear. Every step was slow. Every splash felt loud. The road stretched endlessly ahead of me. I imagined the entity moving through the downpour, tracking me, waiting for the last of the daylight to die. Then a white SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. I almost cried with relief when I saw the driver. It was Sharma Uncle. He lived 2 doors down from us. Everyone knew him. Everyone respected him. He was a retired government officer with a gentle voice and neatly combed hair. He had spent part of his pension helping fund a small library for girls in our area. He greeted my parents at festivals. He brought sweets during Diwali. He always called me child and asked about my studies. My father trusted him deeply. My mother had once said he was one of the few good men left in the neighborhood. Child, he called, his voice warm with concern. The roads are completely blocked. Come inside, sit in the back. I'll drop you home. It's not safe for a girl out here. The dark is coming. My fear loosened. The car looked like safety. It meant I would be indoors. It meant I would not be on the street when the lights fully came on. It meant a respected elder had seen me and chosen to protect me. My mind began checking the rules like beads on a prayer string. Get indoors before dark. Respect elders. Accept help from a safe man. Keep your head down. Be polite. I thank God for sending him. I opened the back door and climbed in. My wet clothes made a dark patch on the leather seat. Thank you, Uncle, I whispered, keeping my eyes on my lap. He smiled at me through the rearview mirror. Good girl, he said. The drive was quiet except for the hard drumming of rain on the roof. I kept my gaze lowered, exactly as I had been taught. I watched my own wet hands twist in my lap. I watched water drip from the edge of my scarf. I did not question the route at first. A good girl did not question elders. A good girl trusted men her parents respected. By the time I looked out the window, it was too late. We were turning into the basement parking lot of an under-construction commercial building he owned. I recognized it vaguely from conversations in the neighborhood. The concrete structure had been half finished for months. No shops were open there yet. No workers were around at that hour, not in that storm. The SUV rolled down into the basement. The automated garage door closed behind us. The sound of the storm became distant, muffled, and then almost gone. We were sealed inside a dark concrete tomb. Panic struck me so hard I could not breathe. "Uncle?" My voice trembled. "Where are we?" "My mother's waiting." He did not answer. He turned off the engine. The dashboard lights died. Darkness filled the car, broken only by a faint gray glow from the basement entrance. I heard his seatbelt click open. I heard him move. The fifth rule came to me with terrible force. Never be alone in a room with a man. But did a car count as a room? The driver's door opened. Then the back door opened. Sharma Uncle climbed in beside me. The smell of cheap cologne, wet leather, and stale tobacco filled the cramped space. He was no longer smiling like a kind elder. Or maybe he was, but the smile had changed shape in the dark. His hand brushed my thigh. Then he grabbed my wrist. His strength shocked me. It was brutal and sudden, nothing like the soft, fatherly man from the neighborhood. "Uncle," I whimpered, shrinking against the door. I clutched my wet scarf over my chest. "Look down. Do not look the demon in the eye. Do not anger it." He pinned me against the seat. His hands pulled at the heavy fabric I had trusted for years. I heard my kurti tear. I felt his hot breath near my neck. For 1 second, I froze and waited for the universe to punish him. This was not how the rules were supposed to work. I had followed them. I had covered my skin. I had stayed quiet. I had respected him. I had called him Uncle. I had entered the car because the street was dangerous and he was safe. I had done everything right. So where was the ward? Where was the spiritual shield? Where was the cosmic order my mother had promised me? Nothing came. The darkness stayed dark. The concrete stayed still. The world did not split open. No God reached down to stop him. No invisible protection wrapped around me. The silence was complete. Then something woke inside me. It was not fear. It was rage. A white, hot fury opened beneath my ribs and spread through my whole body. It burned away every rule, every warning, every soft command I had been given since childhood. In that moment, I understood something so clearly that it felt like a second birth. The rules were a lie. And if the rules were a lie, then obedience was not protection. It was surrender. The first rule said never look them in the eye. I snapped my head up. I drove my gaze straight into his face. I did not look at my lap. I did not stare at the floor. I forced him to see me. Not the polite girl from the neighborhood. Not the quiet daughter. Not the obedient child he thought he had trapped. I forced him to see the hatred burning in my eyes. He flinched. That small movement changed everything. The sixth rule said not to scream. It said not to fight. It said aggression would feed the monster. I screamed anyway. It was not a polite cry for help. It was not a soft plea. It was a raw, animal sound that tore out of my throat and filled the basement. I did not call him uncle. I did not remind him of God. I did not beg him to see me as a daughter. I fought. I dug my fingernails into his face and raked downward as hard as I could. Skin tore beneath my nails. I clawed toward his eyes. He screamed and fell back, clutching his bleeding cheek. "You bitch," he hissed, shocked more by my defiance than by the pain. But as my anger filled the car, something else answered it. The air began to vibrate. The temperature dropped so sharply that my breath turned white. His breath did too. The rain outside seemed to stop, as if every drop had frozen in the air. The darkness under the back seat thickened. It rose like black smoke, slow and heavy, gathering itself from every corner of the car. I should have been terrified. I was not. For the first time in my life, fear was not the largest thing inside me. Something heavier had taken its place. Something cold. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting for me to stop being silent. I understood then. There had never been a phantom demon hunting good and bad girls according to rules. The entity was not born from the dark alleys. It was not drawn by bright clothes or exposed skin. It did not come because a girl laughed too loudly or came home late. The entity was born from us. It was the rage we had swallowed, the screams we had pressed down, the terror of every girl who had followed every rule and still been taken. It was the last breath of those who waited for rescue and never received it. It was the anger of Gaeta and the girl from the park, and the girls whose names became whispers, and the girls whose stories were buried under shame. For years it had been fed by our silence. Now it was awakened by my refusal. The shadow rose behind Sharma Uncle. Cold tendrils wrapped around his arms and pinned him in place. He thrashed, but he could not move. For the first time, real terror filled his face. Not performance, not concern, not the fake warmth he had worn for decades. Real, helpless fear. Whispers filled the SUV. They came from the seats, the windows, the roof, the concrete, and the rain beyond the door. They were not sad. They were furious. We followed the rules. The voices hissed. It was never fair. The shadow held him tight. Then it turned toward me, though it had no face. I felt the place where its eyes should have been lined up with mine. A cold voice entered my head. "Give us a voice," it whispered, "and we will give you teeth." I understood the offer. I accepted. I opened my mouth and breathed in the black smoke. It poured into my lungs like winter. The pain was awful, but it was beautiful, too. I felt the final terror of every missing girl slide into my veins. I felt their fear, their shame, their unanswered prayers, their last moments of understanding that no rule had saved them. I took all of it in. I took the fear and crushed it down into something sharp, freezing, and full of malice. Then I pushed it into Sharma Uncle. Not with my hands, with a new darkness inside me. The black smoke forced itself down his throat. His eyes bulged. His body shook. The scratches on his face turned dark at the edges, the blood freezing into black crystals against his skin. The shadow in the back seat faded because it no longer needed to stand behind me. It was inside me now. Sharma Uncle whimpered. He pressed himself against the door as if he could escape through it, but he could not move unless I allowed it. He looked small, pathetic, stripped of his reputation, his festivals, his library donations, his respectful greetings, and his fatherly voice. He was nothing but a cowardly monster in an old man's skin. "Please," he whispered. His voice cracked. His hands trembled. "I'm your uncle. You are nothing," I said. My voice was not only mine anymore. It was layered with others, deep and cold, as if a crowd spoke through my throat. I spat in his face. I did not kill him. Death would have been too fast, too clean, too easy. The world had given men like him escape after escape. Respectability, silence, doubt, forgiveness. I did not want to give him one more. Instead, I reached into his mind with the cold tendrils of my new self and tore out the part of him that chose. I hollowed him out until he was only a shell. He remained alive. He could breathe. He could walk. He could hear. But his will was gone. The rules were his now. I climbed into the front passenger seat. My wet and torn clothes no longer mattered. The freezing air softened. The darkness pulled back. Outside, the monsoon rain crashed down again, loud and heavy on the roof of the SUV. "Drive," I told him. He obeyed. His movements were stiff and mechanical. There was no warmth in him now, no fake grandfatherly kindness. His trembling hands shifted the car into gear. His eyes were wide, empty, and powerless under my gaze. As the garage door opened and the storm rushed back around us, I looked out at the flooded street beyond. For the first time, the darkness did not feel like it belonged to something hunting me. It felt like it belonged to me. I have a lot of work ahead of me now. There are so many Sharma uncles in the world, men with respected names, soft voices, clean clothes, and locked rooms. Men who hide behind family, religion, money, age, and kindness. Men who teach girls to be silent because silence makes hunting easier. They made the old rules. Now it is time for them to learn new ones. Story 3. I always believed that after losing my wife, life would become nothing more than a quiet gray routine. I thought every day would feel the same. Wake up, make breakfast, take my son to school, go to work, come home, make dinner, help with homework, sit in silence, sleep badly, and do it all again the next day. I thought grief would not be loud forever. I thought it would become something dull and heavy, something I carried because I had no other choice. I believed I had to survive for my son, Ethan, and that was all. My wife's name was Emily. Even writing her name still hurts. Emily and I got married in our early 30s. Our love story was not simple. We were not one of those couples who met, fell in love easily, and moved through life without trouble. We argued. We broke up once before we got married. We had months where we barely spoke because both of us were too proud to admit we missed each other. But underneath all of that, there was something deep and steady between us, something that kept pulling us back together. She was a calm woman. That was the first thing most people noticed about her. She could walk into a noisy room and somehow make it feel softer. She loved black coffee, the kind with no sugar and no cream. She said bitter coffee made her feel awake in a way sweet coffee never could. She hated loud noises. If a door slammed, she flinched. If someone shouted in anger, she went quiet. But she was not weak. She had a quiet strength that made people listen without her needing to raise her voice. She was a teacher, and she was good at it. Children trusted her. Parents liked her. Even difficult students seemed to soften around her. She used to say that children did not need adults to be perfect. They needed adults to be steady. I think she believed that about love, too. When Emily gave birth to Ethan, there were complications. I do not like remembering those hours, but I remember them anyway. The bright lights, the sharp smell of the hospital, nurses moving too quickly, doctors speaking in low voices, my hands shaking so badly I could barely sign the forms they gave me. Emily was pale and exhausted, but when they finally placed Ethan near her, she smiled in a way I had never seen before. 2 weeks later, she left the hospital carrying him like he was a piece of heaven. We had 7 happy years after that. Not perfect years. No life is perfect. But happy. Real happy. We had late dinners after Ethan fell asleep. We had tired mornings where Emily drank black coffee while I burned toast. We had quiet evenings on the couch with Ethan sleeping between us, his small hand resting on her arm. We had bills, stress, work, school meetings, laundry, small arguments, and apologies whispered in the dark. We had a life. I worked as an engineer. My job was demanding, but steady. I liked numbers, plans, and things that followed rules. Emily laughed at me for that. She said I trusted machines more than people because machines made sense. Maybe she was right. She brought warmth into our home. I brought structure. Ethan brought laughter. Together, we worked. But there was one thing I noticed almost from the beginning of our marriage. Emily had a dry cough. It started just 1 month after our wedding. At first, it was nothing. A small cough in the morning. A little clearing of the throat. She told me it was the weather. Then it went away for weeks, sometimes months. When it came back, it was usually during winter or after a stressful week at work. She always had an explanation. Allergies, dust, cold air, too much talking in class, not enough sleep. I asked her to see a doctor many times. She always refused. It's just a cough, she would say, smiling like I was overreacting. You worry too much. Maybe I did worry too much. Maybe I did not worry enough. I still do not know which thought hurts more. Then one night, the cough changed. It was winter. Ethan was already asleep. Emily and I were in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. She coughed once, then again, then bent over the sink and could not stop. At first, I thought it was one of her usual episodes. I brought her water. I rubbed her back. I told her to breathe slowly. But her face turned pale and then blue around the lips. We went to the hospital. What we thought was another bad cough turned into a severe lung infection. It moved fast, too fast. The doctors used words like respiratory failure and aggressive treatment and unstable. I left my job immediately and stayed by her side. For 5 days, I sat in that hospital room and watched machines breathe and beep around the woman I loved. Ethan stayed with my mother at her apartment, not at our home. I told him Mommy was sick, but the doctors were helping. I told him she would be home soon. I believed that when I said it. Emily died on the 6th night at 2 a.m. My hand was holding hers when it happened. One moment she was there, weak and barely breathing, but still there. The next moment, something left the room. I cannot explain it better than that. Her body remained in the bed. The machines were still there. I was still holding her hand. But Emily was gone. It happened so fast that even now, years later, some part of me still waits for someone to tell me there was a mistake. Ethan was 8 years old when we lost her. From that day on, he became my entire world. He had always been a quiet boy, but after Emily died, the silence around him deepened. He loved reading. He liked stories about animals, space, and old castles. He was afraid of the dark, though he tried to hide it because he thought he had to be brave for me. Every night, I slept beside him. I told him stories about his mother until his eyes closed. I told him how she used to sing badly on purpose while cooking. I told him how she hated loud motorcycles. I told him how she cried the first time he said, Mama. I told him she loved him more than anything in the world. After he fell asleep, I would lie there beside him and cry quietly into the pillow. That was our life for a while. A quiet routine. Gray, painful, but survivable. As Ethan grew older, he started looking more and more like Emily. The same wide eyes, the same shy smile, the same way of tilting his head when he was thinking. Sometimes he would look up from a book, and for half a second, I would see her face in his. It hurt, but it also helped. It made me feel like some part of her had stayed with us. Then, a few months ago, Ethan began saying strange things. At first, there were small comments, little things I thought were part of grief, or memory, or dreams. He would say, Mom liked this song, even when I was sure he had been too young to remember it. Or he would say, Mom used to stand there when she was sad, and point to a place near the kitchen window where Emily had indeed often stood after hard days at school. I told myself, children remember more than we think. But then the details became too precise. One morning, while eating cereal, Ethan said, "Mom told me you still keep her blue scarf in the bottom drawer." I froze. I had never told him that. The scarf was not in a place he could easily find. I kept it folded under old winter gloves, not because I wore it, but because it still smelled faintly like her perfume if I pressed it close enough. I asked him how he knew. He shrugged. "Mom said you take it out when you miss her." I did not know what to say. Ethan is 10 now, and the strange things have only increased. One night, I woke up to a soft, whispering sound coming from his room. It was not loud. It was low and gentle, like someone speaking close to a sleeping child. I got out of bed carefully and walked down the hallway. The apartment was dark except for the small night light near the bathroom. The air felt cold, though the heater was on. When I reached Ethan's doorway, I stopped. He was sitting upright on his bed. His blanket was around his waist. His eyes were open, and he was staring at the dark corner beside his closet. "Ethan?" I whispered. He did not look at me. I stepped into the room. "What's wrong?" He turned his head slowly, and his face was calm. Too calm for a child awake in the middle of the night. "Mom came to visit me," he said. A chill ran down my spine. I forced myself to breathe. I walked to the bed and sat beside him. "You were dreaming," I said softly. He shook his head. "No, she was here. She said she misses you." My throat tightened. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Your mom is in heaven, buddy, I know," he said. "But she came here too." I wanted to tell him that was impossible. I wanted to be firm, to bring him back to reality before grief carried him somewhere dangerous. But there was no fear in his face, no confusion. He looked like a child who had just told me the sky was blue. "What did she look like?" I asked before I could stop myself. "She wore the blue dress," he said, "the one with the small buttons. She touched my hair." I stood up so quickly the mattress shifted. The blue dress. We buried Emily in that dress. I had chosen it because she loved it. Ethan had not been allowed to see her at the funeral. My mother and I decided he was too young. I never described the dress to him. Not once. The next morning, I found a long black hair on Ethan's pillow. Emily had long black hair. I picked it up with shaking fingers and stared at it for a long time. Then I put it in a small drawer in my bedroom and told myself it must have been an old hair. Maybe it had been stuck in the pillowcase for years. Maybe it had been on one of her old blankets. Maybe there was a normal explanation. There is always a normal explanation if you are desperate enough to find one. But things kept getting worse. Ethan started waking up in the middle of the night and asking me to leave the kitchen light on. "Why?" I asked the first time. He rubbed his eyes and said, "Mom doesn't like the dark." That was true. Emily hated total darkness. She always wanted at least one small light on somewhere in the apartment. She used to say darkness made the walls feel too close. I had forgotten that. Or maybe I had forced myself to forget. A few nights later, I heard footsteps in the hallway after midnight. Soft footsteps. Bare feet on wood. I got up quickly and stepped out of my room. The hallway was empty. Ethan's door was slightly open, but when I looked inside, he was sound asleep. His breathing was slow and even. The kitchen light was on, just as he had asked. I stood there for several minutes, listening. Nothing moved. Still, the apartment did not feel empty. It felt alive. That is the only way I can describe it. The air felt heavier. The shadows seemed deeper in the corners. I had the strong feeling that someone was standing just behind me, watching over my shoulder. I turned around so many times that night that my neck started to hurt. I did not sleep. I sat in the living room until dawn, staring at the hallway and listening to the silence. After that, Ethan began drawing pictures of his mother. At first, I was happy. His therapist had once told me drawing could help children process grief, but when I looked closer, the pictures made my stomach turn. In every drawing, Emily was standing behind me. Sometimes I was cooking, and she stood behind me with one hand on my shoulder. Sometimes I was sitting on the couch, and she stood behind it, looking down at me. Sometimes I was sleeping, and she stood at the foot of the bed. Ethan always drew her with long black hair, the blue dress, and a calm smile. "Why is Mom always behind me?" I asked one afternoon. Ethan looked up from his crayons. "Because she is," he said. I tried to smile. "What do you mean?" "She's always behind you, Dad. She's protecting us." I wanted those words to comfort me. They did not. That night, while brushing my teeth, I felt cold air move across the back of my neck. I looked into the bathroom mirror so fast that toothpaste foam fell from my mouth into the sink. For 1 second, I thought I saw her, a pale shape behind me, black hair, blue fabric. Then I turned around, and there was nothing there. I did not tell Ethan. I started sitting outside his bedroom door at night. I told myself I was doing it because he was afraid of the dark, because he needed me nearby, because I was being a good father. But the truth was, I was afraid to leave him alone. I was also afraid of what I might see if I went inside at the wrong moment. Some nights, he whispered in his sleep. Not words I could understand, just soft murmurs like he was answering someone. Sometimes he smiled while sleeping. Sometimes he reached one hand toward the empty space beside his bed. Once, I heard a woman's voice humming. It came from inside his room. It was a song Emily used to hum when Ethan was a baby. I sat outside his door with both hands pressed over my mouth, unable to move. By morning, I had convinced myself I had dreamed it. Then yesterday happened. I was getting ready for work when I found the words on the bathroom mirror. They were written across the glass in the steam, though no one had taken a shower. The letters were clear, careful, and familiar. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." I stood there staring until the words began to fade. The handwriting was Emily's. Not similar. Not close. Hers, Emily had a very specific way of writing. She made her capital D too large. Her letters leaned slightly to the right. She always connected the last two letters of words, even when she printed. I knew her handwriting the way I knew her voice. Ethan did not write it. He could not have. He does not know how to copy her writing. He barely remembers seeing it. And I had not touched the mirror. I called in sick to work that day. Then I took out the old drawer where I kept Emily's letters. Birthday cards, notes she left on the fridge, a small paper she once put in my lunch bag that said, "Stop working so hard and eat, idiot." I compared them to the words I had photographed on the mirror. The same. Exactly the same. That should have made me happy. A message from my wife. Proof that something of her remained. But all I felt was fear. Because if Emily was really here, why did the apartment feel so wrong? Why did the rooms grow colder when Ethan smiled at empty corners? Why did I feel watched, even in the shower? Why did I sometimes wake up with the smell of black coffee beside my bed when I had not made coffee in hours? And why did Ethan seem happier every day while I felt more and more like something was being drained out of me? He smiles more now than he has since Emily died. He laughs alone in his room. He reads aloud to someone I cannot see. He tells me, "Mom is happy because we are together again." Together, that word bothers me. I do not know if this is love. I do not know if a piece of Emily refused to leave because she missed us. I do not know if grief opened a door. I do not know if my son is being comforted by his mother or pulled towards something wearing her memory. Sometimes I think about taking Ethan and running away from this apartment, packing a bag, driving to my mother's place, never coming back. But then I wonder if leaving would make things worse. If she really is Emily, would she think I was taking her son away? If she is not Emily, would running even matter? Other times, and I hate myself for this, I secretly wish I could see her. Just once. Even for 1 second. I want to see her face. I want to hear her voice say my name. I want to ask if she suffered. I want to tell her I am sorry I did not force her to see a doctor sooner. I want to tell her Ethan is growing beautifully. I want to tell her I kept the blue scarf. I want to tell her I still love her so much that some nights it feels like love is the thing killing me. Right now, it is 3 in the morning. I am sitting outside Ethan's bedroom door with my back against the wall. The kitchen light is on. The hallway is quiet. My phone is in my hand, and I am writing this because if I do not write it down, I might convince myself tomorrow that none of this happened. A few minutes ago, I heard a soft sigh from inside Ethan's room. It could have been his breathing. It could have been something else. I leaned closer to the door and listened. Then Ethan whispered, "Mom says you can come in now." My whole body went cold. I have not opened the door yet. My hand is on the handle. From the other side, I can smell black coffee. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, is the scent of the perfume Emily wore on our wedding day. I know I should take Ethan and run. I know that is what a sensible man would do. But I also know I will never leave my son, no matter what the cost. And if Emily is inside that room, if even one part of her is really there, I do not know if I am strong enough to run from her. The door just moved. Not much, only a little, as if someone on the other side placed a hand against it. Ethan laughed softly. Then a woman's voice, gentle and calm and terribly familiar, whispered through the crack. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." I do not know if she is protecting us. I do not know if she wants something more. All I know is that the door is opening, and I can finally hear my wife breathing again. Story 4. Chief Osceola stared at the couple with a face that looked as if it had been judging the world for hundreds of years. His wax eyes seemed tired, suspicious, and full of old anger. It was the kind of face that had seen too much betrayal and had learned never to trust what stood in front of it. Even though he was only a figure in a museum, there was something too alive about him, something that made Manuel's heart beat faster. Without thinking, Manuel squeezed Quinn's arm. He did not mean to. It was a nervous little movement, the kind his body made before his mind could stop it. The wax figure in front of them seemed to hum with a strange, quiet energy. Manuel felt it inside his chest like a tuning fork had been struck somewhere deep in his body. It was not exactly fear. It was closer to the feeling he used to get as a child when he held baby chicks on his grandparents' farm. They had been so small, so warm, so breakable in his hands. He remembered the terrible thought that would sometimes enter his young mind, the sudden fear that his fingers might close too tightly without his permission. One quick squeeze, and the tiny life would be gone, snuffed out like a candle flame. That same feeling now moved through him as he looked at the wax chief. Osceola was not alone. 2 Seminole warriors stood on either side of him. Their eyes were black glass, shining and empty. If you looked long enough, you could see your own reflection in them, but it was almost impossible to keep eye contact. Their wax faces looked too still, too smooth, too full of silent hate. They did not feel like figures made from wax and cloth. They felt like they had been made from long nights, tight fingers, sweat, old wounds, and the kind of patience that could turn a human likeness into something almost human, but not quite. That was what bothered Manuel most about wax figures. They stood in that ugly space between life and death, too detailed to be objects, too still to be people. They were imitations that somehow seemed insulted by their own existence. Every face carried the same quiet hostility, as if the figures hated being stared at and hated the hands that had shaped them. The Wax Museum had been Quinn's idea. Manuel had agreed because he did not know how to say no to her. In truth, he was not comfortable there at all. He was anxious by nature, and that place made his anxiety worse. Everywhere he looked, dead glass eyes watched from dark corners. The air smelled old, like dust, floor polish, and wax left too long under weak lights. If Manuel had been a more confident man, they would have gone to a bar instead. If he had been even more confident, he would have asked Quinn out 6 months earlier instead of applying for a job at a Discount Beverages, the stupidly named gas station and smoke shop where they now both worked. But Manuel was not a man who made bold choices. He felt more like a background character in other people's lives, someone who stood nearby while the real people spoke, laughed, flirted, fought, and changed the world around them. He watched things happen more often than he made things happen. Still, as uncomfortable as the Wax Museum was, he preferred it to a bar. A bar meant noise, crowds, bodies pressing close together, and too many conversations to follow. A nightclub would have been even worse. Manuel's anxiety in crowded places could turn his whole body into a locked door. He would listen to people talk, waiting for the right moment to join in, but no moment ever came. Conversation moved past him like busy traffic, and he stayed at the curb, unable to step into it. With Quinn, it was different, or at least he wanted it to be. He had admired her in silence for a long time, back when she was just a regular customer at the shop. He noticed her straight black hair, her red lips, the way she always looked dressed with effort, even when she was only buying cigarettes or a drink. She seemed too polished for a place like a Discount Beverages. Seeing her there was like seeing a mermaid swimming in dirty water. When she started working there, Manuel had been amazed and confused. What was someone like her doing in a place like that? He wanted to ask, but he rarely asked direct questions. Instead, he became helpful. He covered little tasks. He made small comments. He laughed softly at her jokes. He waited and waited for life to create the right moment for him. Life, of course, did not. Quinn had made the first move. It had to be her. Manuel would never have done it himself. If asking for her number had been in his nature, he would not have taken the passive, ridiculous route of applying for a job where she shopped, just so he could exist near her. Their work schedules made things even harder. They usually passed each other like ships in the night, one leaving as the other arrived. But every other Thursday, they were both off. Neither of them had ever been to the Wax Museum, even though they had both lived in town their whole lives. So now they were there together, walking past fake, dead people under dull yellow lights. They saw founding fathers that looked less like statesmen and more like melting grandmothers. Groucho Marx stood near Karl Marx, posed as if they were locked in some strange argument about politics. Einstein stuck his tongue out in the background. Clint Eastwood and John Wayne faced each other in an eternal standoff, and the pistols in their wax hands looked real enough to make Manuel uncomfortable. "Oh, look," Quinn said, pointing ahead. "Robin Williams." The figure was painfully realistic, almost too realistic. It had the familiar smile, the messy hair, the warm face, but the eyes were what stopped Manuel. They looked heavy and tired. human, sad in a way wax should never be. The hair must have taken forever, Manuel said. It was a safe comment. A middle-of-the-road comment. He wanted to be funny, but fear always made him choose the safest possible words. He hoped she would not think he was boring. He hoped she would not think he was trying too hard. They could have used a Neanderthal body and just swapped out the head, Quinn said. She was keeping the conversation alive, but barely. Manuel knew it. She moved through the museum with sharp confidence, her black patent leather boots clicking against the tile floor. She wore fishnets, and the sound of her heels seemed louder than everything else in the nearly empty place. Manuel felt like he was walking beside a beautiful wild animal that had not yet realized he was there. But she had realized. She had invited him. That had to mean something. The museum was arranged in small galleries. One room held gangsters. Another held cowboys. Another had movie stars and musicians. There was a display for classic horror monsters, too. Dracula stood there under a red light, though he looked less like Bela Lugosi and more like a strange mix of other actors. Manuel knew enough useless trivia to know that the Lugosi estate was protective of the actor's likeness, and he almost said that out loud. He decided not to. Then they came to a gallery that was closed. A rope blocked the entrance, and white linen sheets had been draped over the figures inside. Still, enough details were visible to make the scene clear. A large wooden table stood in the center, covered with cruel-looking tools made of metal and leather. Along the back wall, half hidden in darkness, stood an iron maiden. Even under the sheets, the shapes suggested pain, punishment, old violence preserved as entertainment. Both Manuel and Quinn stood there staring. The silence around that closed exhibit felt thick. It was not peaceful silence. It felt like a held breath. Neither of them noticed the two young men who entered the room behind them. "Oh, damn, Jay," one of the men said loudly. "Look at the legs on that one. Fish nets. Wish I'd caught me something that pretty in my fishnet." He was looking at Quinn's legs as if Manuel did not exist. "The only thing you're catching is crabs with your nasty ass," the other man said. They both laughed. They kept talking, kept joking, kept staring. Their attention was open and ugly, not hidden, not accidental. They looked at Quinn with the kind of boldness that tried to turn her into an object while making Manuel disappear. Quinn's eyes flicked toward Manuel. It was only a glance, but he understood it. She wanted help. She wanted him to say something. She wanted him to be the man standing beside her instead of a silent shape. Manuel heard everything. He was not deaf. He was not unaware. In his head, a dozen replies appeared at once. Clever insults, sharp lines, polite but firm warnings. Even a simple "fuck you" would have been enough. But his mind turned into rush hour traffic. Every thought jammed against another, and no words came out. His body locked. He stood there, stiff and silent, while the two men finished laughing and moved on to another wing of the museum. As soon as they were gone, Manuel could move again. Shame returned to him like blood returning to a numb limb. He felt drawn toward the exit. Quinn followed. Quiet now. At the front desk, Manuel did something that felt almost brave. He asked the owner for a refund. The proprietor was dressed neatly in a red vest and tie. He looked formal in an old-fashioned way, but there was something unpleasant about him. His eyebrows and mustache were thick like animal fur. His face had the stiff patience of someone used to watching people lose arguments. "My lady friend was accosted by another customer back there," Manuel said. That is, we would like our money back. I think it's only fair." As he spoke, a fly landed on the proprietor's forehead. The man did not blink. He did not twitch. The fly crawled down the bridge of his nose, stopped at the tip, and stayed there while the man stared at Manuel. Between the tiny black fly and the man's strange formal clothes, he looked like an old-world clown that had learned to smile by watching wolves. Then the proprietor snorted. The fly vanished into one nostril. The man smiled and shook his head. "Only fair," he said, chuckling softly. "Life isn't fair. Haven't you figured that out yet, Pinocchio?" Manuel stiffened. "There is no need to be rude, sir," he said. "I am simply asking for a refund because of an unpleasant experience. Your insult was unearned and imprecise. My nose is clearly proportionate to my face." The proprietor's smile widened. "You have no strings, huh?" he said. "You really think you're a real boy?" Then his teeth showed in a grin that looked too hungry. "Go home, Pinocchio. We're closed." The fly came back out of the other nostril. It crawled through the man's mustache, then up his cheek and onto his eye. Manuel waited for him to blink. He never did, and Manuel never got his refund. Quinn was waiting outside. The failure was obvious before he even reached her. They walked to the car together, and Manuel felt his hand pulled toward hers and pushed away from it at the same time. He tried to open her door, but their positions made it awkward, and he had to step around the car in a humiliating little circle before getting in himself. His radio was broken, so the drive home should have been silent. But for Manuel, it was not. A gnat had found its way into the car and was now exploring his ear canal with awful dedication. He kept trying to wave it away, but the buzzing continued. It was almost helpful, because it gave him something to focus on besides the disaster of the date. Quinn sat beside him, hard to read. Her eyes were slightly unfocused, like she was thinking through a puzzle. "I'm sorry those young men were so rude back there," Manuel said. "Some people seem determined to announce their lack of intelligence to the world. I would have liked to tell them that. But well, you see, Oh, Manny," Quinn said. "You're so old-fashioned. It's sweet. But boys will be boys, right? That's what I like about you. You're harmless. You wouldn't even hurt a fly." The gnat buzzed harder, as if daring him to prove her wrong. Her words hurt in a quiet, lasting way. Manuel could feel an image forming in her mind, like a Polaroid slowly developing. In that image, he was soft, safe, harmless, not a man of passion or force, not someone dangerous, exciting, or strong, more like a stuffed animal, something to talk to, something to keep nearby, something that would never bite. He imagined their future at once. He would become an accessory, a 5'8" purse with a nervous smile, a man she could bring along to keep creeps away, except he had already failed at that exact job. He was not even a scarecrow. He was the cowardly lion, and not the kind who found courage at the end. When they reached her place, Manuel somehow managed to hug her. Their upper bodies touched, but their hips stayed far apart, leaving enough space between them for a basketball to pass through. It was a sad, awkward hug. By the time Manuel got home, he had replayed the whole night at least a dozen times. He thought about the two young men, so loud, so stupid, so crude. He did not even feel like he belonged to the same species as men like that. How could they appreciate someone like Quinn? Her beauty, her shape, the careful way she moved through the world? They were like chimps staring at a marble statue and thinking only of how heavy it would be to carry. That night, his mind was full of Quinn, those men, and the wax museum. It was fertile ground for nightmares. In his dream, a discount beverages was unusually busy. People kept coming through the front door in strange costumes. Sherlock Holmes bought pipe tobacco. Dracula bought wine. A man dressed as Groucho Marx needed a cigar to complete his outfit, but kept getting distracted by Marilyn Monroe. More and more people crowded into the store. The noise became painful. Conversations overlapped. Laughter bounced off the walls. Osceola and his warriors stood in the liquor aisle, making some kind of commotion. The whole store seemed to shake with voices until all the noise blended into one sharp buzzing sound, like insect wings trapped inside Manuel's skull. Then Robin Williams appeared. The room went silent. He smiled, that warm, familiar smile, but his eyes looked as if he had been crying for a very long time. "You know, Manny," Robin said, "it's okay to be sad sometimes. It's a sad life. At least you got to be a real boy for a little while." Manuel tried to run, but his feet would not move. It felt like they had melted into the floor. Then he realized his arms were frozen too. He stood there like a scarecrow while the crowded store watched him. No one spoke, but their eyes judged him. The buzzing remained even after he woke up. That Saturday, Manuel worked the closing shift at a discount beverages. It was strangely quiet for a weekend, which left too much empty space in his mind. He had not spoken to Quinn since the wax museum, and the incident kept replaying in his memory. At first, he had been sure she was as disgusted by those men as he was. But now, doubt had begun to twist the memory. There had been a look, hadn't there? A small one, a micro-expression, not contempt. Something else, something almost secretive. A blush, maybe even a smile, not on her lips, but in her eyes. The thought upset him more than he wanted to admit. Had she enjoyed their attention? Had she been embarrassed because of them or because of him? Had she wanted him to act, or had she already known he would not? He was so deep in his thoughts that he did not notice Big Bill enter the store. Big Bill had no proper address, but everyone in the area knew him. He was one of the regulars at a discount beverages and one of the happier members of the local homeless community. He was large, cheerful, and usually smelled faintly of outside air and cheap alcohol. Manuel liked him and normally made eye contact with him, which was a kindness Manuel did not give to many people. But that night, Manuel only noticed Bill at the last second. Or rather, he noticed what was wrong with Bill. His nose was missing. At first, Manuel saw only a black hollow in the center of Bill's face. He had already handed Bill his change, and Bill had turned toward the door, so Manuel caught only a quick glimpse. But it was enough. The middle of Bill's face was an empty, dark hole. And when Manuel's eyes met Bill's, he saw them sinking back into his skull, as if there was nothing behind them to hold them in place. Manuel tried to call out. His throat locked. His feet felt nailed to the floor. The same frozen terror from the dream took hold of him. He could not move until Big Bill was gone, and the store was empty again. Then his body loosened, and he spent the rest of the night pacing. The next day was Sunday, and a discount beverages was closed. It would have been a perfect day to call Quinn and try to talk about their date, but Manuel could not do it. He spent the day pacing through his apartment, miles deep in his own thoughts. His stomach felt like a python was twisting inside it, but his attention kept drifting to a spot higher up, in his chest, where he felt a strange hollowness. That night, sleep gave him no rest. It only made him still. He slept like an object placed on a table. When he woke Monday morning, he felt worse than before, tired, hollow, and afraid. For reasons he could not fully explain, he decided to return to the Wax Museum. He did not know it was closed on Mondays. As he approached the front window to read the hours on the sign, he saw something impossible inside. In the large bay window stood a wax figure of an organ grinder, complete with a taxidermy monkey. The monkey wore a red vest, just like its master. The organ grinder had thick eyebrows and a thick mustache. The face was unmistakable. It was the proprietor. Manuel did not remember driving to a discount beverages after that. He spent the whole trip wondering how much of his own madness he could reveal to Quinn. He did not know what to say, but he knew he had to talk to someone. And even though he feared telling her would make her pull away from him forever, she was the only person who mattered enough to ask. That was why her little laugh hurt him so badly when he arrived. She did not know he saw it. A quick laugh, a lingering smile, a small sign that he occupied very little space in her thoughts. "Quinn," Manuel said. I just... "Oh, Manny," she said. "Are you okay? You're so pale." She looked different that day. Her black bra peeked just slightly from beneath the edge of her low-cut white button-down shirt. Her lips were painted a shade of red he had never seen on her before. She seemed playful, a little high, a little distant. The python in Manuel's stomach twisted harder, making his posture fold inward. Then a man walked through the front door. He was tall and thick with muscle, built like a work animal. His black leather boots hit the tile heavily, almost like hooves. He wore a leather vest like a biker, but the style was less outlaw and more dark performance. Hanging from his back pocket was a cat of 9 tails, a cruel leather whip with strips braided around bits of metal and glass. Manuel had never seen the man before, but dread moved through him as soon as the stranger walked into the public restroom. Manuel turned back to Quinn. "Have you seen anything strange since our date?" he asked. "Date," Quinn said. The single word hit him like a bullet. Before he could fully feel the pain of it, the leather-clad man came back from the restroom. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "I hate to bother you, but there's no hand soap in the bathroom." "Oh, no problem," Quinn said. "I'll get some from the back." She disappeared through the swinging crash door that separated the sales floor from the stockroom. To Manuel's horror, the man followed her. Time seemed to stop. Manuel stood behind the counter, staring at the door, his mind filled with possibilities, each worse than the last. He strained his ears, desperate to hear something clear, but the same gnat from before, or one exactly like it, buzzed around his face and ears. He kept trying to wave it away, but it would not leave. Behind the door, the silence felt endless. Then came a sharp sound. Thwack! A muffled voice followed. It could have been pain. It could have been pleasure. Manuel could not tell. Thwack! Another sound. Thwack! He could not take it anymore. Every part of him wanted to run, but something pulled him toward the door. He did not push through it so much as let his body collide with it. He felt like a puppet, moved by strings he could not see. His lungs froze. His eyes stayed open. At first, he saw only the man. The stranger's large body blocked most of the view, a wall of leather and flesh under the red glow of the exit sign. He raised the whip behind his head, and Manuel noticed that the leather strands were wet now. Then the man struck again. Manuel stepped closer. The stranger did not seem to care that he was there. Past the man's shoulder, Manuel saw Quinn. She was bent forward, her body held in a pose that was both human and horribly unnatural. Her skin looked wrong under the red light. Where the whip struck, dark marks opened across her. At first, Manuel thought they were wounds. Then one of the marks widened into a black crack. The man struck again. The crack spread. With a dull snap, a piece of Quinn's body broke free and flew to the floor. She made a sound that was both agony and delight. "Co," Manuel tried to say, but that was all he could force out. His body began shutting down piece by piece. If only his eyes had shut too. The man turned and looked directly at Manuel for the first time. He smiled, slowly licked his lips, and pulled a black leather hood over his head. Then he turned back to Quinn and continued. More pieces began to fall from her. Each time the whip landed, another crack opened. Another piece broke away. Wherever something came loose, it left a black hollow inside her, as if she was not made of flesh at all, as if she was empty beneath the surface, like a cheap decoration, molded into the shape of a woman. Her sounds grew deeper, stranger, less human. Then they stopped entirely. Manuel's attention dropped to his own chest. He begged it to move. He begged his lungs to work. His body felt like badly fitting clothes, like a child wearing his father's coat. The buzzing in his ears did not stop. It was broken only by the wet rhythm of leather striking strange flesh. He could not look away from Quinn. Her body was twisted and broken, frozen in an expression of pain and pleasure that no living face should hold. Sometime later, a woman stood inside the wax museum, furious and loud, demanding a refund from the thickly mustached proprietor. She had her child with her, and she was offended by the newest display. The proprietor did not personally see anything wrong with it, but her voice was sharp and constant, and he gave her the refund just to make her leave. A woman's voice, when she does not get what she wants, can buzz like an insect. Besides, he had to admit the new display was more adult than the others. The scene was meant to show a torture chamber, supposedly from the Spanish Inquisition, though the cat o' nine tails was not historically accurate. A beautiful raven-haired figure stood with her hands bound above her head, partly undressed, her face locked in a strange expression between suffering and ecstasy. Her tormentor was a towering brute in dark leather, a figure that had recently returned from repairs. That morning, the proprietor had finally pulled the linen sheets from the other two figures in the exhibit. One was the raven-haired suspected witch. The other was her helpless lover, shackled to a table on the far side of the room, his face frozen forever in silent longing. Story 5. My name is Molly. That is not my full name, but it is the name I feel safe sharing. I am Sri Lankan. I was born and raised on a small island in the Indian Ocean, a place that is beautiful in the way people from outside like to talk about, with beaches, temples, rain, forests, old towns, and stories buried in every corner. But when you live here, beauty becomes normal. The ocean is just the ocean. The rain is just rain. The old beliefs are just things your grandparents speak about while you roll your eyes. At least, that was how I used to see it. I live in Gaul now, I am married, and I have a child. My life is ordinary, if I am honest. Predictable, safe, some days, painfully boring. There are bills to pay, meals to cook, school things to remember, work to do, and family responsibilities that never seem to end. I used to think ordinary life was something to escape from. Now I think it is a blessing when your home feels calm and nothing unseen is waiting outside your door. I was always a skeptic. I grew up in a deeply religious Buddhist family. Our home was full of rituals. Pirith would play at dawn, that steady chanting filling the morning air before the sun was fully up. Oil lamps were lit on Poya days. Elders spoke about blessings, bad luck, spirits, karma, and rules that had to be followed because they had always been followed. There were so many restrictions, especially for young women. Do not go there after dark. Do not walk alone near certain places. Do not laugh too loudly at night. Do not bring things home from forests. Do not ignore dreams. Do not eat this before that. Do not step over this. Do not sleep facing that. I followed what I was told because that was what good daughters did. I bowed when I had to bow. I prayed when others prayed. I observed rituals during family events. But my heart was never really in it. To me, faith was tradition. It was culture. It was something passed down, like old furniture or family recipes. I respected it, but I did not truly believe in it. I thought most of the stories were used to control people, especially women. I thought fear dressed as religion had shaped too much of our lives. All of that changed in 2018. What happened that year forced me to accept something I had spent my whole life ignoring. There may be things in this world that do not care whether we believe in them or not. They may not need our belief. They may not need our respect. And sometimes, for reasons that make no sense to us, they may decide to prove that they exist anyway. I was 26 at the time and working at a private bank in Colombo. I am originally from Kandy, so Colombo never felt like home to me. It was too loud, too fast, too crowded, and too hot in a way that felt personal. The traffic was endless. The buses were packed. The air smelled of petrol, rainwater, food, smoke, and drains, all mixed together. But work is work. Like many young women, I moved where the opportunity was, even if the place did not feel like mine. I rented a small apartment on Wadala Beach Road with another girl from my office. It was nothing fancy. The walls had cracks. The taps were unreliable. The shower worked only when it felt like being kind. The windows rattled whenever the wind became rough, and during heavy rain, the whole place felt damp. But it was affordable and close enough to work, and that was enough for us. We tried to make it feel like home. My roommate loved decorating. She placed a few plants on the balcony, arranged photo canvases on the walls, bought cheap vases and fake flowers, and somehow made our mismatched furniture look intentional. We had a little shoe rack by the entrance, a small sofa, and a TV that was mostly used for noise. It was not perfect, but after long days at the bank, it felt like a place where we could breathe. The week everything happened, I had just returned from an office trip. Our team had traveled to Trincomalee for work because we had a promotion going on there. It was not exactly a holiday, but any trip away from the usual desk, customers, and spreadsheets felt like a break. On the way back, we stopped in Habarana. It was meant to be a relaxing addition to the trip, just a short break before returning to Colombo. We walked briefly through the Hurulu Forest Reserve with a guide. It was rushed, hot, and honestly, not very dramatic. I remember the dry heat, the smell of earth and leaves, some monkeys watching us from the trees, and a ridiculous number of crows making noise. Nothing frightening happened. Nothing strange stood out to me. Because of time and money, we did not hike the eco park. Some people were disappointed, but for us locals, elephants were not exactly a magical surprise. Beautiful, yes, but not unbelievable. We had grown up hearing about them, seeing them, respecting them, and staying out of their way. We returned late that night. My roommate did not come back with me. She got off in Kurunagala to visit her parents for a few days. I remember feeling happy about that. I loved her, but I also liked having the apartment to myself. A little quiet, a little freedom, no one asking what I wanted for dinner, no one leaving hair in the bathroom drain. Just me, the rain, and a peaceful evening. The next morning, I went to work as usual. Nothing felt strange, no headache, no bad dream, no uneasy feeling following me around. It was just another Monday. I dressed, traveled to Colombo, sat through work, spoke to customers, answered questions, handled documents, and watched the clock like everyone else. By 6 in the evening, I was finally on my way home. Back then, I did not drive, even though I had a license. I did not have a car. Most young people in Sri Lanka cannot afford their own cars, and I was not different. So I took the bus from the city and walked the last few blocks alone. The November rains had arrived in full force. Thick sheets of water poured from the sky and turned roads into mirrors. Puddles became ponds. The drains overflowed. Streetlights glowed a dull yellow through the drizzle, and the air smelled of wet soil, dirty water, and the sharp, diluted stink of dog mess from the roadside. It was a horrible evening to walk home. By the time I reached the apartment, Muddy water had soaked into my clothes, my sandals were filthy, and I was angry at everything. I unlocked the apartment door and stepped inside. Even though rain was falling outside, the inside of the apartment was still hot. That is Colombo weather for you. Wet and hot at the same time, like the whole city is breathing on you. I took a long shower and thanked every god I knew that the power had not gone out and the shower had decided to work. Afterward, I changed into a loose cotton nightie and finally relaxed. Being alone felt peaceful. The apartment felt quiet in a good way, not empty, just calm. I was not in the mood to cook a proper meal. I made a simple bowl of Maggi noodles, cracked an egg into it, stirred it without thinking, and carried it to the sofa. Outside, the rain tapped and drummed against the windows in a steady rhythm. I turned on the TV, not because I wanted to watch anything, but because I liked having sound in the background. Some random program was playing. I barely paid attention. It should have been an ordinary, boring evening. Around 7:45 p.m., my phone rang. It was my boyfriend at the time. He is my ex now, and honestly, that should explain enough. Our relationship was already near its end. It was the kind of relationship where every conversation felt like walking on broken glass. You knew you were going to get hurt, but you still kept moving because you did not know how to stop. The argument started within 10 minutes. I cannot even remember what it was about. That tells you how useless most of our fights were. One moment we were talking, and the next he was accusing me of something, or I was defending myself, or both of us were saying things we had said 100 times before. Then he cut the call. I remember feeling grateful when he did. I threw my phone onto the sofa and stared at the TV without really seeing it. I was annoyed, tired, and frustrated. My noodles had gone soft and cold in the bowl. The rain kept falling outside. That was when I noticed something. From the corner of my eye through the glass balcony door, something looked wrong. At first, I could not understand what I was seeing. It was only a shape, a dark unevenness where there should have been green leaves in small pots. I turned my head and looked properly. My plants looked crippled. I stood up slowly, walked to the balcony, and slid the glass door open. For a moment, I just froze. 3 or maybe 4 of our plants were dead. Not a little dry, not drooping because someone forgot to water them, not tired from too much sun. Dead, the leaves were blackened. The stems were soft and rotten. Some of them bent over the sides of their pots like broken necks. It looked as if something had sucked the life out of them from the roots. 2 days earlier, they had been perfectly healthy. My roommate loved those plants more than she loved me. She watered them, turned them toward the sun, checked the soil, and spoke to them sometimes as if they were children. There was even a small rose plant. It was my favorite. It was dead, too. It made no sense. Plants do not rot overnight like that. They do not turn black and soft in 2 days, especially not all at once. I told myself it had to be some kind of parasite. A fungus. Maybe too much rain had done something. Maybe there was a logical explanation I did not know because I was not a plant person. Still, I felt sad. Sharply sad. More than I expected. Maybe because the dead plants looked like a warning before I knew what they were warning me about. I took photos to send my roommate and stepped back inside. That was when the feeling hit me. The second I crossed the threshold from the balcony into the apartment, my stomach dropped. My skin prickled from my arms to the back of my neck. It felt like walking into ice water, fully clothed. The air inside the apartment had changed. It felt occupied, not full, occupied, as if something had entered with me. I stood there for a moment, my heart beating faster, then shook my head. You are tired, I told myself. You had a long trip. You argued with him. You are alone and being dramatic. I went back to the sofa, but the feeling did not leave. My palms began to sweat. My hands trembled slightly. Fear crawled up my spine without giving me a reason. That was the worst part. I could not point to anything and say, there, that is what scares me. The TV was on. The lights were on. The door was locked. Rain was falling outside like normal. But inside my body, something was screaming that I was not alone. I decided to lie down. It was still early, but I thought rest might help. I left the TV on because the noise made the apartment feel less empty. Then I went to my room, left the door half open, lay on my bed, and picked up my phone. I scrolled through YouTube, trying to distract myself with random videos. After a while, my breathing slowed. The fear faded enough that I felt silly for being scared. My eyelids became heavy. I fell asleep. I do not know how long I had been asleep when I felt it. Something was gripping my feet. I woke with a violent jerk, my heart hammering against my ribs. At first, my mind tried to explain it away. My feet were always cold, especially during rainy months. Maybe the blanket had twisted around my ankles. Maybe I had dreamed something and woken in the middle of it. Then the grip tightened. It was not cloth. It was not a dream. Something was holding me. I tried to kick. I tried to pull my legs away. Nothing happened. My body felt heavy, too heavy, like all the strength had drained out of my limbs. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out at first. Panic rushed through me so fast that I could not breathe properly. Then the pressure came. The mattress dipped. Something climbed onto me. I was lying on my stomach, my chest pressed into the bed, my face turned to the side against the thin sheets. The weight settled over my back. It did not shift or move like a person trying to balance. It just pinned me down. Hard, steady, every breath became shallow and painful. I could feel the bed beneath me and the weight above me, trapping me between them. Then the smell hit me. It was the worst thing I have ever smelled in my life. It was thick, wet, and rotten, pungent and sour, like decayed earth after many days of rain, mixed with something metallic and sickly sweet. It reminded me of old stale fish, cow dung, and something dead left in a drain. It filled my nose and mouth. My stomach twisted violently. I gagged into the pillow, trying to breathe through my nose, but that only made it worse. It felt like my lungs were filling with it. I could taste it on my tongue. My heart was pounding so loudly that I thought I could hear it over the rain. Then I screamed. It was not a normal scream. It was raw and ugly, pulled from somewhere deep in my body. I screamed because I could not move. I screamed because the smell was choking me. I screamed because whatever was on top of me was not human. I did not see it, but I knew. A human body has a shape you can understand. This weight did not feel like that. It felt wrong. Fingers, claws, bones, I do not know. All I knew was that something was pressing me into the bed, and it wanted to hurt me. My legs twitched. My arms tried to move. Nothing worked. Then, as suddenly as it came, it vanished. The mattress lifted. The pressure disappeared. My limbs loosened. The stench was gone so quickly that it felt as if the walls had sucked it away. My eyes went to the bedroom door just in time to see it slam backward against the wall with terrible force, as if something had rushed past it on its way out. I lay there, shaking, sobbing, and gasping for air. I tried to remember how to breathe normally. The room smelled like nothing now, just sheets and rain and my own fear. But the stink remained inside me. I could still feel it in my throat and chest, like it had left a stain in my bones. Then I heard knocking, voices, my neighbors. I do not remember getting off the bed. I do not remember crossing the room. I only remember opening the apartment door and seeing 5 women standing in the corridor. 2 familiar aunties from nearby apartments, 1 grandmother, and 2 younger girls. All of them looked worried. At first, I lied. I told them I had seen a shadow in my room. I said I panicked and screamed. I did not want to tell them the truth because the truth sounded insane. I was a grown woman, a bank employee, standing there in a nightie, shaking and crying because something invisible had climbed onto me in my bed. I was embarrassed even while I was terrified. The women exchanged looks. No one laughed. No one mocked me. But I could see it in their eyes. They did not fully believe the shadow story. They knew I was hiding something. They told me gently that it was all right. They said these things happened. They told me to get some rest and leave a light on. One by one, they started to leave.